Our next review for solving quadratics is going to be completing the square, and this is helpful if our equation is not factorable. And so to complete the square, we have in the box here, we are going to add b divided by 2 squared, which is the square of half the coefficient of x. So here's a formula to go off of. I like to more so think about this as a process. And so when you are doing completing the square, you need your ax squared plus bx, and then we want to leave a blank. So we're going to move our c value over to the other side. So negative c, and then we're going to add to that side too, because if we're going to add something, we will have to add on both sides. So this is going to be our generic setup that I like to use. And so if you look at our first example here, another important piece of information, let me jump back over here. The a value must equal 1 in order to do completing the square. You have to have a leading coefficient of 1. If you don't, you have to divide as your first step, and we will look at an example of that. But in our first example, we have our a value is just a 1. So we have our ax squared plus bx, and then we're going to add in a blank there, equals our c value, and then we're going to add in a blank. So here's what our setup is going to look like. X squared plus 8x plus blank equals negative 14 plus blank. So we want to be able to create a perfect square here. But our perfect square has to work with the equation that we have so far. So in order to do that, we can always get our correct number there. And we can always then create this binomial squared by taking half of that b value, whatever it is. In this case, it's 8. So we have x squared, which means we need an x as our first term. We're going to take half of this b value. So half of positive 8 is positive 4. And then to complete the square, we just take 4 squared. Well, 4 squared is 16. And if I add 16 to one side, I have to add it to the other. So then if I combine negative 14 plus 16, that's a positive 2. So I'm going to write this out now a little bit neater. I have a lot of marks on this one. So right now we have x plus 4 squared equals 2. Well, we talked about solving with our square roots, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. So we get x plus 4 equals plus or minus root 2, and 2 we don't know the square root of, and so we're just going to leave it like that. And then we're going to subtract 4 on both sides. So we get x equals negative 4 plus or minus root 2. And for these, you can leave that as your answer. You don't have to give 2 rounded decimal answers. But like I said before, if we were graphing or anything like that, that's when we would want to get those exact answers. Or sorry, the decimal answers. So there is a review of completing the square. Now let's take a look at another example. So here we have a leading coefficient of 1, that's good, but I need to move this 6 over to the other side. So then it's going to give us x squared plus 2x plus blank equals 6 plus blank. So then to create my binomial squared here, I'm going to take half, so I'll have x, and then half of 2 is a positive 1. If I square 1, it's still 1, so I'm adding 1 to both sides. 6 plus 1 is 7. Take the square root of both sides. So we get x plus 1 equals plus or minus, and again, root 7 doesn't simplify, so we're just going to leave it like that. Subtract your 1 on both sides to get your final answer. So we get x equals negative 1 plus or minus root 7. Now, letter B, we have a coefficient that is not 1, so we need to divide everything by 3 first. And even if you get fractions, that's okay. We have to divide by 3. So we get x squared minus 4 thirds x minus 5 thirds equals 0. I'm going to add that 5 thirds over to the other side. So we get x squared minus 4 over 3x plus blank equals positive 5 thirds. You don't need to write the positive here. 5 thirds plus blank. So working with fractions, that's okay. We're still going to work our same process. So we're going to get our binomial. X squared will give us an x here. half of negative 4/3. It's like multiplying times 1/2. So if I take negative 4/3 times 1/2, that's negative 4/6, and that simplifies to negative 2/3. Now, if I square that, I square the top and I square the bottom. And even though it's negative, when I square it, it's positive. So 4/9 is what we're going to add. And that means I need to add 4/9 on the other side. Combining these two to get like terms or the common denominators, this would be 15/9 plus 4/9, which is 19/9. And then to finish solving, we're going to take the square root. So we get x minus 2/3 equals plus or minus, and then square root of 19 we don't know, but the square root of 9 in the denominator we know is 3. And we add over the 2/3. So we can write our final answer as x equals 2/3 plus or minus root 19/3. Now you may see that as an answer when you're working and you're checking an answer key. You may also notice that the denominator on both is 3. So you could also write this as 2 plus or minus root 19 all over 3. Either way, both of those answers are correct.